I'm pleased to share this information, providing an overview of water use and transfer issues in Tippecanoe County. Our water resources are so precious. That includes the Wabash River and also groundwater that is used for most of our water needs. So the proposed pipeline to the Leap Lebanon development has caused some concern. As you know, it's been proposed from a well field on the Wabash near the Granville Bridge, traveling through about a 35-mile pipeline to where it will feed this new development. Now, Tippecanoe County has good water availability in some areas like the Wabash River, while it's been known for decades that water is scarce in Boone County. The pink, brown, and yellow areas are very scarce. So certainly they do need water, but that raises the question of, should water availability be included in selecting sites for economic development? Also, while water is more abundant in Tippecanoe County, there are many users already. According to the IDNR data, the highest is Lafayette Waterworks, and I'll provide the amount in million gallons per day. That's the unit that I'll use throughout this presentation. Second is Evonik, Tate and Lyle, the two plants together are third. Indiana American, serving West Lafayette, is fourth. Purdue is also a large water user. All the irrigation together is about 1.7 million gallons per day. Now, most of these users withdraw water, use it, and then return the wastewater to the Wabash. Irrigation water is mostly consumed by plant evapotranspiration, so that's a little bit different. But this is different than the proposal to send water to Leap Lebanon, which will withdraw water and send it to another basin and not return it to the Wabash. It might go to Sugar Creek or Eagle Creek or the Eagle Creek Reservoir or somewhere else. They haven't said. This is called a water transfer or water diversion, and it would therefore have more effect on the Wabash River than the current users. So what people want to know is, will water withdrawn for this pipeline affect the current users? And that includes both the large water users like Lafayette and so many others, and home wells. Some of you may have a private well and are worried about the future there. We also need to think about future users. Certainly, the economic development officials here in Tippecanoe County have a lot of plans for water use as well. And we also need to think about the Wabash River ecosystem, where we have rich communities of fish and mussels and other aquatic organisms. I do want to make it clear that the Wabash River is not replenished by the Great Lakes. There's a continental divide up by Valparaiso, and water flows north. It also flows northeast in the Fort Wayne area, and in between, there's water flowing over to the Illinois River. So the Wabash is only replenished by the water within the blue watershed or basin area shown here. If it were, this water transfer would not be allowed because there's something called the Great Lakes Compact that Indiana and other states signed in 2008 that requires all Great Lakes Basin water to stay within the Great Lakes. You may wonder why I'm talking about the river at all when this is a groundwater issue. And it's because this process that they will be using draws from both the river and groundwater. It's called riverbank filtration. A well is drilled near the river, and as it starts to pump, water is drawn in both from the groundwater, but also from the Wabash River. And so that's an important part of this. My understanding is that a lot of the testing they're doing is to better understand how quickly the water can move from the Wabash into the groundwater. My colleague, Marty Frisbee, is talking more about groundwater, but I'm going to say a little bit about the effects, potential effects on the Wabash. We are very fortunate that the U.S. Geological Survey measures flow in the Wabash right here at Lafayette. That's from the Brown Street Overlook in West Lafayette, and has done it. It does it 24 hours a day and for many, many decades. This shows just the last 15 years, and in the units I mentioned earlier of million gallons per day, although hydrologists usually talk about stream flow as cubic feet per second, but I'm doing this to compare. So you can see that the peak flow here in 2013 was more than 50,000 million gallons per day, also known as 50 billion. And at this scale, the maximum withdrawal that I've heard anyone talk about is minuscule. It practically looks like zero. You can't really see it. But we're not really concerned about the peak flows. So I'm going to zoom in now on just this area, just 5 years, and just the flows that are below 2,000 million gallons per day, or 2 billion gallons, which are shown here. Now, at this scale, you can at least see the 100 million gallons. And we can also see that the lowest flow on record was in 2012, and it was about 400 million gallons per day. So the highest possible withdrawal, and really, if it were, it makes it's unrealistic that this would all be from surface water, but it would be about 25% of that lowest flow. Now, is that a concern? I can say that some people think it is, and some people think it is not, but I wanted you to have the numbers to sort of give a rough estimate of what we're talking about. It's also reasonable to remember that other withdrawals could come in. If another 100 million gallons per day withdrawal came in, or yet another, we'd be up closer to this minimum, and this could certainly happen in our current policy environment. It's also true that our flow is changing. The Indiana Climate Change Impacts Assessment has shown that our rivers are going to have higher flows in the high flow times and slightly lower flows in the low flow time. This is for the White River, but the picture would be similar for the Wabash. And this year, when we're in a severe drought currently, makes us remember that we can't really count on anything with water, and droughts can occur, of course. So my first point is that a rigorous analysis is critical to understanding the impact of water withdrawals or transfers. I've just shown a few numbers here. It's not nearly what we need to assess the potential effect on our water resources. And this can be done. We have many expert hydrologists at Purdue and elsewhere in Indiana, but to do that analysis, it requires time and funding to do so. For this particular development, the IEDC's consultant in Terra has stated that in-depth analyses are being conducted and that the results will be shared with all of us. I'm not aware of anyone who has seen them yet, but do expect them. But we need to remember that such analyses are not required and may not be done for other similar withdrawals in the future. So that provides some background for looking at the Indiana regulations. Would these kind of things be required? This information is what the Indiana Department of Natural Resources staff that are responsible for water rights and use presented at a virtual forum at Purdue. And so I'm confident of this next 4 slides that I'm going to show you. First, just an aside, if you want more information, the recording of that virtual forum, 2 hours long, you could hear their whole presentation, is available from the League of Women Voters site or just by Googling. But there are 3 laws and a plan that might be relevant. The first is Indiana Code 1425-7, the Water Resources Management Act. This requires registration of all significant water withdrawal facilities and annual water use reporting. This law is very important because it's because of this that we know who is using how much water in Tippecanoe County or anywhere else. But it doesn't require any advance notification or a permit or even an analysis before additional withdrawal facilities are in place. Another one that might be relevant is the emergency regulation of groundwater rights. This one is important for any of you who have small private, home wells that you feel might be affected. The Department of Natural Resources is willing to come now and measure the water level. And if in the future you feel that it's affected, they will come and they'll do an analysis and they'll make sure that you are compensated, usually by drilling a deeper well. To make things right with a small capacity well. It doesn't, however, protect the large capacity wells, and there's no restrictions on high capacity groundwater pumping unless there's the declaration of a groundwater emergency. And there's only been one of those in the entire history of the law in 1988 and just in 2 counties. A third law that sounds like it might be relevant is the emergency regulation of surface water rights, but it applies only to freshwater lakes with an area of at least 10 acres, so it doesn't apply to the Wabash. Finally, we do have a water shortage plan in place, and this provides information to coordinate the response to water shortage conditions and a number of voluntary conservation resources and tools, but it is a voluntary plan, and it doesn't address the impacts of proposed withdrawals. So the conclusion of the look at Indiana laws is that there is no current law addressing potential impacts of a large water withdrawal. We can characterize the current situation as the law of the biggest pump, which means that anyone with a larger pump can take water from anyone with that someone with a smaller pump was pumping. It's not first come, first serve, like you may have heard in the West, where anyone who has a prior right keeps that. Here, even if someone invests in a large pump, someone else can bring a still larger pump and take the groundwater. So it seems like that might be a concern for economic development as companies think about investing and the reliability of their future water supply. Second, I want to emphasize that there's no requirement of any analysis of the impacts of a water withdrawal. So again, this proposed LEAP Lebanon water transfer will be well studied, but there's no requirement that any others will. And so this is certainly a concern for any community who may be in a similar situation or future withdrawals here in Tippecanoe County. Representative Mike Aylesworth introduced a bill in the 2023 legislative session to address this issue, and it's very important that we hear his thoughts on why this is important. So I'm pleased to be able to provide this overview of the water use and transfer issues and look forward to hearing the other speakers. Thank you.